Our first keynote speaker is a global leader who comes with over 25 years of experience on the consulting side of business. It's none other than Kass, Global Chief Operating Officer and President International at V Communications. Kass also serves on the board of Lalvani Foundation. That's right, helping to bring greater diversity to the PR, advertising, and marketing industry. Today, Kass will talk about the purpose of sustainability in future-proofing our communications. Kass, all yours.
As I was introduced, I'm Kass, Global Chief Operating Officer and President of International at WE, and it's my pleasure to be here with you today. I think we've had really good sessions yesterday, really good connections with a number of our leaders in the industry, as well as all of our people. Today I heard a lot of talk about connections and togetherness, and those are going to be true as we take on sustainability and ESG in the future as well. Before I start today, I just want to start and share with you a short video. So if you'll play the video, we'll get started.
As calls for climate action grow louder, more and more leading brands are recognizing the urgent need for a fair and equitable transition to a sustainable future. A just transition. A just transition recognizes that the people who are most likely to be impacted by climate change are often the least able to adapt, and that it is possible to address the needs of the planet and the needs of the people who live on it. For brands, even the smallest steps can have a big impact. Let's think bigger about who our stakeholders really are, from shareholders and customers to all people whose lives intersect with our brands. Let's look at sustainability as an investment, from a cost to a driver of innovation. Let's create unity that inspires action and make an equitable impact. And let's do it all knowing effective communication aligned with positive action will bring stakeholders along on the journey. When we work together to implement a just transition, we achieve more than just clean and green. We lead the way towards a sustainable future without leaving people behind. We move everyone forward, fairly and equitably. It all starts with one small step.
So today we'll talk about some of those small steps that we can all take to make a difference in the world. I'm standing up here today representing my partners at AV and WE, the big group over here. It's great to be with them. And I work with them together with our global clients, our APAC regional clients, and our local clients. And we believe that we sit at a very exciting time in the communications industry. We sit at this unique intersection of brands and businesses and communities and society and culture and creativity and communications, yes, and sometimes public relations and earned media, but it's really an exciting time and an exciting place. And perhaps never has there been a more opportunity to apply the expertise of communications than to the area of sustainability and ESG. Every year, WE produces a research report together with our partners at YouGov Research called Brands in Motion. It's our point of view on the world around us. And it essentially says brands are constantly in motion, and you can either decide to drive that motion or allow that motion to happen to you. We're now in our 5th year of this research with YouGov, and we've talked to 90,000 consumers around the world in 9 markets, including here in India. And this year's report is entitled The Bravery Mandate. In essence, it simply says it is time for brands to fear less and do more. Consumers want brands to take actions. In fact, they expect brands to take actions. In the past 2 years, as we've done this research, more people expect brands to make a positive impact in the world than ever before. In fact, it's risen 30%. And at the same time, consumers have grown even more skeptical about brands. Today, more than ever, consumers are worried about greenwashing and purpose washing, and you hear those terms come up even from consumers directly in the research. So it's time for all of us as communicators and as brands to step forward and do more. That's why we consider this a time of the Bravery Mandate. So I'll take you through some of the findings of our research and then some actions that we can take as communicators. So let's get started. So I'm going to start with some key insights about consumers, and specifically our India consumers. More than 2/3 of our Brand in Motion India respondents expect brands to make multi-year investments in societal causes that are important to them. And 70% said they preferred brands that address society issues, and they will do business with brands that address society issues. And the number one societal issue for Indian consumers, as identified in our research, is climate change mitigation. You can see up there, followed by water conservation. What was interesting about this was true in India, but it was also true in every other market around the world. So this was also true in the US, it was true in Africa, it was true in Europe. Globally, this chart is the same. Climate change mitigation is the number one sustainability issue facing consumers today. As we look at those findings, and we dug into that a little bit more, we said we need to know more about sustainability and how consumers are thinking about sustainability. So we went back to YouGov. We commissioned an additional report entitled Making Net Zero Net Positive for Everyone. And we really looked deeply into sustainability. And I want to take you through more of those findings now. Because it's not just, sustainability is not just a Western issue anymore. It's not a European issue, it's not an American issue. It is truly a global issue. And what we found was consumers care about it as much in India as they do in any place in the world. And brands increasingly need to take it as seriously as consumers. And as we've seen, when brands really react to what consumers want, they move the business forward, they earn market share, and they keep that market share. I think globally, as you can see, that the standards have been set, whether they be the UN standards, whether they be sustainable development goals, commitments, conferences. We all know the politicians have said their piece. They've set big goals. And in India, the good news is you are not just kind of talking the talk, but your country is walking the walk with some really ambitious goals. Now, I think we don't have to get into a political discussion today, but we know some of these have been already walked back. But I think what it really tells us is that government can set the goals and politicians can make grand speeches, but it's going to be up to us as brands to lead the way and actually deliver the results. So it's one thing for the brand to say, or a politician, or me, or any of us to make lofty goals. It's another thing to put those things in action. So our research gave us some key insights to start to turn big political statements and grand goals into action. So I'll share some of those with you. So there's 4 key insights. I'll give you a few headlines now, and then we'll dig a little bit deeper into each one of those. First one is don't fake it. Second, think and act inside out. The third, ESG, purpose lives and breathes. And last, in this case, you're not in competition with everyone else, you're in competition with yourself. So let's dig in a little bit more about each one of these insights. So regarding don't fake it, I really like this quote from Andrew Winston. He wrote it together with, co-authored the book Net Positive with Paul Pullman of Unilever. And he says, when a company announces, in essence, we're doing ESG, what does that tell you? It's like saying we do HR. We have a department for that. We have a senior vice president running it. But really, what are you doing with your people? Are you investing in people? Are you helping them to find their purpose? Or maybe you're just laying them off via Zoom and hiring temporary staff. That's the HR equivalent, right? In fact, I think we've seen examples of exactly that. And there are some brands that haven't learned, because I think we saw that again just last week. More companies laying people off via Zoom and being punished by that. And I think how you kind of move and equate that is, you looked at another way. You could look at ESG the same way. Just, do we have a sustainability department? Have we put somebody in charge of it? Yes. Have we created a lofty goal and made a statement and had a board report about it? Yes. But will we actually put it into action? I think that's the key, and that's what consumers are looking for, is how you put it into action. And I think now more than ever, consumers are really smart about this. So consumers are aware of climate change. They are, in fact, leading us. They understand supply chains, carbon footprints, scope 3 emissions, ESG, energy sourcing. I think the media has created very aware consumers of climate change. We are dealing with really aware consumers. They're, in fact, many ways, they can speak the language better than we can. I think we have to start getting more comfortable with being uncomfortable talking about sustainability, because we are going to be talking about it quite a bit going forward. Additionally, our Brands in Motion research found that B2B decision makers and consumers expect brands to act with purpose with regard to climate change. 57% of Indian consumers believed, however, that brands will only act with purpose if it helps them generate sales and sell more products. So we have to think about that. Consumers want us to do sustainability work, but do they trust us to do sustainability work? Or are we only in it for our own self-interest and our short-term sales and revenues? Consumers, at least more than half, believe we're only into it for our own short-term initiatives and our own short-term sales goals. So that's why our actions, I think, have to be as more powerful than our words. The second insight is to think and act inside out. And I think if you don't recall anything else from this presentation, I would ask that you double down on your communications with your employees. It doesn't matter if you're an agency in the room or if you're a client in the room, employee communications and internal communications and getting your employees to buy in and participate with you is going to be your strongest opportunity. Our employees can be our brand's most influential evangelists and their biggest advocates. Alternatively, they can be terrible, and they can really hurt your brand as well if they don't act in alignment with the brand and you don't have buy-in from them. So you want to communicate with your employees early and often, setting the agenda and bringing them along the way. We've found that employees, when they're brought in and they're given the broad goals, but then given specific goals for their business unit, for their team, for their individual, and those specific KPIs, there's much more buy-in and employees participate more. And when employees participate more and they live your brand purpose, you're much more impactful. Our third insight is that purpose lives and breathes. As communicators, we talk a lot about corporate reputation and being the long game and establishing a narrative over a long period of time. And yes, we do that well. But we also recognize that change doesn't happen overnight, but that we're living in the middle of probably one of the times of the most change that any of us have ever lived through. So if you think about all the change that we've lived through in the last 2 years, whether that change starts with COVID and a global pandemic, societal change, racial inequality, social issues. Now there's a war in the Ukraine, and now we're talking about inflation and possible recessions. We're going through a time of maximum change. So how do we take all of that change and drive consistency and stability? Brands are asking for us to do that through sustainability. So companies don't become carbon neutral overnight. I think it takes years to kind of overhaul processes, systems, supply chains, and build the infrastructure that you need to really drive meaningful change. But that doesn't mean that we can't start now and your key stakeholders don't want to start right away. Which leads to our fourth insight, which is you're in competition with yourself. This doesn't mean that we do more of the same, that we do the same things. The goal is to work together and do the thing that only you and your brand can do. You're making your business more sustainable at a time, and this is a chance where we can all win. We don't have to be in competition, although I would say this is where the opportunity really comes in for communicators and for all of us. So if you think about it, we're not building a competitive offering, we're building our story. And perhaps no one is better built to tell stories and long-term narratives than the PR industry. Our corporate communications teams, our agency teams, working together to tell those stories. Absolutely, that is what PR and communications was built to do. This is our time to shine, and sustainability is our chance to make that impact. So as we think about this, we were thinking, as I prepared this, I was thinking, well, we can't go and make recommendations to our clients without taking our own medicine. What are we doing as an agency to actually make an impact? And are we doing enough? So I did want to share with you a few of the things that we're doing as an agency to try and make an impact. So the first thing that we're doing is we joined the United Nations Global Compact. And last year we achieved 42% reduction in our greenhouse gases versus our 2019 baseline. We've established long-term greenhouse gas reduction goal and aligned that to scientific-based targets. Secondly, we focused on reducing our corporate travel footprint. So as much as I would like to be here, as I used to be maybe 3 or 4 times a year, now unfortunately I'm going to be here 2 times a year, and we're going to do a lot more Teams and Zoom calls. But the reduction in carbon footprint is important and it's worth it. Next, we're also going to invest, and we have moved our entire IT infrastructure to the cloud. All of our real estate and all of our facilities meet sustainability requirements in the markets that we work in. And we've reconfigured all of our power savings, and we're doing our part for recycling everything that we do. So, and then lastly, I think as a large independent agency in the world, we've aligned our goals and we've aligned our vendors and our suppliers to work with us to meet our goals. So are we doing enough? Probably not even close. Are we getting started and bringing our people along with us? Yes, and that's really the goal. So I think there's plenty of other things that we can do and that other companies can do, and there's things that you can do. I think the participation and the contribution is what counts, and everybody's getting started, and you have to get started. So it doesn't matter if you're a multinational, if you're an independent consultant, set some sustainability goals for yourself and start communicating those goals to the people that you work with. And as we do that, one of the things that we look at is, let me just kind of sum this up. So as we look at those 4 key communication insights, the first one is around closing the gap. Second one is debunking the myths. Communicate the benefits of your strategy and make that clear. Then listen often and speak clearly as we go through this. And lastly, think global and act local. Making sure your ESG strategy has a local impact but delivering action with far-reaching benefits. So those are some of the things that I think all of us can do as we get started on this. I think one of the things that many of our clients will ask us, and some of you will ask, is who's doing it well, and sometimes who's not doing it well. We want examples and case studies of who's doing it well. So I wanted to share just a few examples of what we've done as Avian We and with We. So one of our largest global clients is Microsoft. And we've partnered with Microsoft to launch their sustainability initiative with a $1 billion research fund to help get to carbon negative by 2030. And their goal is to take out all carbon that the company has ever produced in its 40-plus year existence out of the atmosphere by 2050. So they've got ambitious goals that we're helping them to communicate around the world. I think in India, we work with Tetra Pak on their Go Nature, Go Carton campaign, working with them and their corporate communications team as they look to lead the industry in packaging solutions that are more sustainable and environmentally friendly. Our team in Johannesburg, South Africa, has worked with NAMPAC for many years, telling their story of sustainability, and it started with creating boxed water solutions. In fact, if you're an athletics fan like I am, and a track and field fan and supporter, you saw NAMPAC cartons at the World Track and Field Championships. After everybody finished their race, they were given a boxed water product. And at first, that seemed very unusual. They weren't using single plastic. They were using NAMPAC boxed water solutions. It was a very effective global strategy for them. We also work with the Plastic Free Foundation and have for many years in Australia, where we work with them on Plastic Free July. And I think just this last July, we ran over 3,000 pieces of coverage for them, which was great. But in the last year, we've helped them on their efforts to remove over 900 million kilograms of plastic waste from the oceans around Australia. I think some of these other brands that you see, the logos on the screen, are brands that we work with on sustainability and purpose. And although not all of them, some of them we don't work with, but we have gone in and looked at their programs and we found them to be really effective and all-encompassing. And they engage all of their audiences, their consumer audiences, as well as their employee audiences in the event. So I encourage you, if you're looking for great examples of clients and brands that are doing it right, I think here's some great examples. So with that, we've also provided some samples in an e-version of our study. And you can go on, click the QR code. You can talk to any of the Avian We people. You can talk to me after this session or anyone with Praxis, and you can get an e-version of our Brands in Motion research or our Net Zero, Net Positive for Everyone research. So we can provide that. So with that, I just wanted to say, those are a few examples of the work that we do, what you can be doing as a brand, and what we all can be doing together to make a positive impact in the world. So with that, I think, Rakhee, you want to come up and we'll do some Q&A? Thank you.
That's right. Thank you so much, Kass.
Hi, everyone. It's absolutely amazing to be here at Praxis. It's a really high-energy event, and I think it's something to do with the founder, Amit Prabhu, who's always somewhere or the other. Amit, shout out to you. So let's get back to a very pertinent topic, and I think, Kass, the presentation was really brilliant. It covered something which we all know is a very, very relevant topic today, purpose. Before we ask him a question, I just want to say that there are two kinds of companies. One that exist to make money, and the second that exist to serve the nation and its people. And I'm really fortunate and privileged to be part of the latter. Yes, the Tata Group that I worked with for 30 years, whose foundation was set a century ago on the premise of really serving its people and giving back to community. They are nation builders, as we all know. A century on, the purpose rhetoric has just become louder and louder, but are they really walking the talk? And that's my question to the expert, Kass Sells, to understand all these buzzwords like ESG, diversity and inclusion, purpose, sustainability. Are these just things that corporations, global corporations, are just leveraging because of the topicality of it and to put it into like their marketing communications agenda so that it's like feel good? Or is there muscle behind it? Do you see a shift? Are there things happening?
That's a great question. I have to tell you a story first.
Sure.
Well, two parts. One, I love these kinds of discussions a lot more than those kinds of discussions. So it's great to do this.
Which is why we're doing it.
Right. And I think these are really even more valuable. But I have to tell you, with regard to Tata and the Taj Group, who you're very familiar with and have worked with a lot. So Nitin and I were at the Taj in Mumbai this week. And we were sitting having coffee after having breakfast. And a gentleman came up who works in the restaurant, and he said to me, Mr. Sells, I noticed you had a cappuccino and you had a brown sugar in your cappuccino. I know you're leaving today, so I have prepared for you a cappuccino with brown sugar in it. And he gave me a paper cup with this. And what it brought home to me was that is a great example of living the brand, of luxury, of personal service. That kind of personal service is what a brand is all about.
That's true.
And it's way more impactful than any of these words that we can say and speeches that are given and
Very
commitments that are made. Those kinds of actions are how brands live, because we tell those stories over and over again. And that's where where a brand really makes an impact in the world, is that day-to-day customer experience.
Thank you for that. I think that's what sort of differentiates the Taj from the rest. We call it Tajness. And it's about these little sort of sincere acts of caring which sort of differentiate them. And it's living their purpose. This is pretty much part of the value system.
Purpose, exactly.
So yeah, so that's a really good example. Yeah. But do you see any other corporations really putting their weight behind it? Is that shifting? Or is just like a really good rhetoric?
Well, I think we see more and more companies actually doing this. And the companies that are doing it now, early, are going to win brand share. We do see more companies spending more of their time in purpose-driven, sustainable work. And it is no longer just a statement. That's, I think we often will see brands that are not doing it correctly. There will be a statement on the webpage. There will be something deep in the FAQs, buried on our sustainability practices and policies. It's often written in legalese that nobody can understand. And we believe you have to take it out of that and bring it to the people who are actually meeting with, connecting with, meeting with your customers, your consumers, and make it tangible and make it real.
That's
so
fantastic.
I think that's the best practice.
And I think we are setting an example by walking the talk. We saw what you presented in terms of numbers, and that's pretty cool. My second question is really something that will help us all communicators, because we always have this dilemma about sort of, organizations and clients want it all. They want to be known as purpose-led companies, but at the end of the day, they want their PR campaigns to be aligned to the commercial business objectives.
Right.
How do you deftly and cleverly sort of integrate this into mainstream communication frameworks? And do we need to really tell our clients that it also needs to be embedded in the customer experience and then it's probably more effective? Just tell me your thoughts on about how should one do this, what should be the approaches. I think it'll help all of us communicators.
Yeah, I definitely think it should be ingrained in the customer experience. You've got to experience it for real in that example that I shared. I think that's more impactful.
Yeah.
But I do think that brands that are doing it well are creating business outcomes. There's got to be business outcomes to doing this. It's not just a nice to have, and it's not just to do because it's popular to do. I think there's we just saw a McKinsey and Bloomberg study that there is going to be $53 trillion, a third of all assets are being spent in sustainability. So brands that are putting real money behind sustainability going forward in the future. And that's brands of all levels, from small business to Fortune 500 companies are putting real money behind sustainability and gaining market share. And I think if you go back to the first point of the research, if 70% of our consumers in India want brands to participate in making a positive impact in society, we have to do it because our consumers are demanding it.
Sure, sure. And any examples of how somebody's done this well in terms of how they've integrated into mainstream sort of PR or digital or whatever the medium is?
Yeah, I think that when we see examples of brands that are doing it well, they set an overarching narrative, and you're telling that narrative over time. It's not a single event. It's not a single campaign. It's not. Yeah. There are great campaigns, and we will award great campaigns, and we'll recognize great campaigns. But I think the companies that are doing it really well are doing it over time, and they're evolving their messaging as their sustainability goals evolve, as they make an impact in the world. I think they really do build that long-term narrative, and you set a strategy, and you set actions and KPIs within that. You get everybody engaged in that and bring everyone along with it. I think those longer-term initiatives are where the real impact is going to be.
So consistency is the name of the game. You can't do this flash in the pan and then forget about it. It has to be in it for the long haul. Right. That's.
Yeah, I think the Plastic-Free July in Australia is a 9-year-old campaign. And it's just now starting to have massive impacts. Yeah. Did it have those same impacts in year one? No. But has it grown year over year over year and they've stayed consistent with it? Yeah. That's where real impact happens.
And you have to keep demonstrating it so that then people buy it. Thank you for that. My next question is about the pandemic. We can't not talk about it. We're meeting after the pandemic, and we've all gone through our share of challenges. So, on one level, I think the pandemic brought a lot of organizations together. They were at the forefront. They were really doubling down on purpose. They were helping healthcare workers. They were doing a lot for migrant workers. They were really sort of there at the forefront, like I said. But there were also organizations with great reputations who had to lay off people and who had to also sort of abort supply chains because, I mean, the circumstances demanded it. And they couldn't work with all their vendors and partners, and the ecosystem got severely impacted. How do you think they suffered the impact of this in terms of organizations that already built that credibility on purpose?
Well, I think it's an interesting topic because I think for many of us, COVID was extremely challenging as individuals and as businesses. For some of our businesses and for us as communicators, both corporate communications and agencies, it was a time when maybe our clients needed us more than ever before. Right. Whether it was crisis communications, communications around COVID, internal communications programs, helping our clients through a lot of change. And so, from a revenue standpoint, from a profitability standpoint, sometimes it was good for us. And and we all adapted fairly quickly and moved forward quickly. The question will be, will we continue to do that, right? And will we continue to make those impacts? Mm-hmm. Will we continue to give? Yeah. Or if times get a little bit tough, what will be the first thing to be cut? Remember,
Yeah.
we've talked about this, I think, before, where it used to be the first thing that gets cut is
Sustainability.
communications and PR budgets, right? Which actually should be the last thing to be cut, right? But will those things be cut in times where it gets tougher? Will sustainability programs be cut back or commitments be pushed out?
Yeah.
I think we, as communicators, have to advocate for continuing those, to double down on those, because our customers are asking for them.
Right.
So I think that's really like, it will not be a time when we can go back. There is no going back. On climate change, there's no going back. On sustainability, there's no going back. So there's going to have to be other sacrifices made, but we are going to have to move forward.
Stay with the
and I think
commitment.
for us as communicators, we're going to have to lead that conversation.
Right. I'd like to share an example, if I may,
Yes.
about the Tatas. So the Tatas didn't lay off a single person, but at the end of the day, they also have an ecosystem that got impacted, right? So at the Taj, there were like partners and maybe contractual labor, etc., that were impacted. So what the Taj did was to create a voluntary fund, so senior management, middle management that was willing to contribute to that fund. And then that fund helped sort of sustain those families that were impacted. So obviously we couldn't do that much by sort of paying them their regular fees or retaining them, but we lived our purpose. The purpose was our North Star, and we worked around it and created this new opportunity of a fund, through our people who were more than willing to contribute. And this was across levels. So I feel like if it's your guiding North Star, it's ingrained in the culture of the company, it just comes naturally. And these are things that people appreciate you for, even if you're not spending that much that you were supposed to for sustainability or, anything that you've allocated for. So I just thought I'll share that example.
I love that example. I think at we
True.
And so one of the things that we did among many was that we gave our employees what we called an 8 for you,
Right.
and we did it 3 different times, where our employees could take time for their mental health, not part of their PTO or their vacations or anything, just take time to get away, to do something for themselves.
Right.
And to step away from, and people really appreciated that and used that time.
Yeah.
I think another example, it happens to be from the hotel industry, that when we were in Bangalore, we had a PR Labs event at the Conrad Hotel. And the GM came and welcomed us afterwards and greeted us, and he was terrific, great hotel. And he said their goal was not to lose one person during the pandemic. They did not host people during the pandemic. They were closed for 14 months. He said, but our goal was not to lay off one
Right.
person. However, they did have one person who got sick and passed away from COVID. The employees got together and said, we have to help this person's family. We're a family, we
Right.
have to help his family. They got together and they made a recommendation
Amazing.
to the GM to hire his father as a driver for the hotel. So they did. They hired his father as a driver, and he remains a driver for the hotel now. And it's just a symbol of when they talk about welcoming you as a family, that the employees really lived that brand.
Beautiful.
Right?
That's a
And they
beautiful
were
story.
living their purpose.
Yeah, nice.
It's a great story.
Very nice. We spoke about, sustainability and purpose and all of that being for the long haul. What do you do with startups? Like India is the 3rd largest startup ecosystem in the world. There are like 65,000 plus startups. They don't know a thing about purpose. I mean, all they're interested in is like meet the needs of, the customer and the investor and make money for them. So do companies like you, an organization, we actually sort of help these kind of startups to understand, articulate, and then sort of have that higher purpose?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's evolving. I think for a long time, it was a startup's primary goal was to get to scale, build up
Right.
to scale,
Yeah.
and then either sell or try and go public, become a unicorn. But we're seeing the startups that we talk with, whether they be in Bangalore or Silicon Valley or in Seattle or anywhere in the world, more often than not, purpose is at the heart of what they do. They are
Right.
trying to do something bigger
Sure.
than just make money and just grow and make their
Right.
investors money. And whether you're working with groups like Sequoia Capital or you're working
Right.
with, they're increasingly asking for their companies to have purpose at the center of what they do, to have a sustainability and ESG plan, and to
Right.
activate those plans. So you don't have to be a Fortune 500 company to have
Sure.
those. Every company has to have those.
Understood.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point, because all they need is a little bit of guidance and sort of hand-holding. I'm coming to my last question because I really want to ask the audience a few questions. I mean, I want them to ask a few questions. This is about the millennials. They seem to know more about purpose. And apparently 66% of millennials said that they join companies that have a sense of purpose.
Exactly.
Now, when I was growing up, and I'm definitely not a millennial, I didn't know anything about purpose. Like, people would ask me, like, what is your purpose and all of that, and we'd ponder and come up with like some bullshit because we wanted to sound cool. But the question is, does every individual need to have a purpose? Is that important?
Well, I would answer it to say, when you're looking at companies today to work for, you might want to look at companies and their purpose and their sustainability plans and ESG plans and see if that company is the kind of company you want to be part of.
Right. Yeah.
And I think millennials are great. Gen Xers are great. Like, young people are fantastic today because they're forcing change.
Right.
They're forcing some of us old people to make change. And they are increasingly asking those kinds of questions. When we interview and recruit them, they're saying, what are your policies around sustainability?
Right.
Or do you have recycling programs? What are my ability to take days off for mental health leave? What are your women's reproductive rights programs?
Right.
They're asking tough questions that are more important and in many ways deeper than just, do I have the skill sets to do the job? Is it more important is this the kind of company I want to be part of?
Right.
Does this company's purpose align with my purpose in the world? And I think
And
that's
that-
when you get really engaged employees, really fantastic employees that do great work for you.
Yeah, so that's really simple. This is easier because if your value system matches the company that you've decided to join, you're already living your purpose. So don't get too bothered when somebody asks you this question about, do you know your life purpose? It's all right. If you're working for an organization that's doing great good, it's good. We'll now throw it open for questions. Oh, there's somebody back there as well. Archana.
A question that I have for both of you is to say, if an organization is looking to sort of craft its purpose, what is it that they need to be mindful of? Some tenets that could, somehow be able to sort of also carry their people along with it, right? Like, otherwise it's not going to be meaningful or be sustainable. So some commentary on that from your experience would be valuable.
Yeah, we have a program that we have called Purpose Finder, in which we take our clients through an entire program to help them find their purpose. It starts with their brand purpose and moving into sustainability. But importantly, I think it engages all the stakeholder groups. So it's not just the board level, or not just your investors, or not just your customers, but your employees, your customers, your suppliers and vendors. That finding your purpose that aligns across all of your stakeholder groups is what's super important. And that process takes time and takes, yes, we look at what your competitors are doing, but more importantly, you're trying to find that essence of your brand, that one thing that you are about that nobody else is about. And I don't know if you've gone through that with Tata. You've done some of that work.
That's true. It's a lot. Well, it's like you said, it's internal communications and consistently sort of going with the same narrative and the message and living your purpose, demonstrating it, and not just sort of, like you said, setting lofty goals. It's very important to get the buy-in from the internal customers and your employees, because they're going to be your brand ambassadors. So definitely consistent demonstration first, and of course communicating and building awareness around it.
Parvati here. So, what's really interesting is that as communications professionals, we constantly make the mistake of thinking of purpose as a campaign that could lead to media conversions or to garnering coverage. But what I've seen at today's session is that even small gestures can be purposeful. And, how do you recommend, as professionals who are working with clients who want to bring purpose into their narrative, how do you think we can grapple with and sort of maintain that balance and give them the kind of sage advice that they really need to hear?
So I think one way is to bring it forward as the priority of the meeting, that it's not the last thing on the agenda, but the first thing on the agenda, because that's where you need to start. And we have some clients that we start with the purpose, literally at every meeting. We start, is this program, is what we're talking about aligned with our purpose as a company? And why, and how is it contributing to our purpose? So I think for some of us in the agency business, if you've been in agency, sometimes we as PR and communications people have been at the end of meetings where the whole presentation goes on, and then we'll get to the PR at the end, or you go on, and then we'll report the media plan at the end, and there's hardly ever any time, and then you're rushing through it. What we like to do with that, with regards to purpose, is turn that on its head and put purpose at the beginning of the meeting, because it should drive everything else that you're doing. If it's not driving everything else, you got to ask why we're doing this, right? What is the purpose of this meeting if it is not to drive the greater brand expression?
I also find as a strategy, if beneficiaries talk about the company's purpose, it's far more impactful and effective. So you don't want to do stuff which is on your face, because then it just means like you're doing it obviously to get the PR. So there has to be a balance, like you said. And use different creative ways of doing it. I think using beneficiaries has always been very effective.
I think one other thing on that, from an agency standpoint, for the agencies in the room, I think, look at your brief. Is purpose in the brief?
Yeah.
Really in the brief. Oftentimes there's a lot of assignments and a lot of to-dos and not in the scope of work, but is purpose in the brief? And is it driving the key insights? Is it driving the strategy? Is it driving the big idea? Does the big idea align to the purpose of your client? If it's not in there, we need to rethink the brief.
Yeah, just a quick question.
Yes.
Hi. Can you divorce purpose from a founder's personality? Can an organization have a purpose of its own, which is independent of, let's say, the founder's flamboyant lifestyle or whatever else?
I think no doubt it's easier when you have a outgoing, outspoken founder who aligns, to purpose. If you're Richard Branson, that's easier to do, right? But it's not a requirement. A purpose can be found, and the purpose of a company can be changed, can be revised, can evolve over time. It is not a static thing that will forever be. Some cases it might be, but in most cases it will evolve with leadership, and leadership can set that purpose. That is, if nothing else, I think that is the job of communications professionals, to work with the C-suite to set that purpose and make sure that it's relevant, that it's original, that it is impactful in the world, and that it's driving the kind of behaviors in the company that you want. So
Yeah,
you've seen
no,
the
you're
opposite.
right.
You've seen
You're
the opposite, where your company has been very purpose-driven,
Absolutely.
by founder-led.
Yeah, but I would just add that there are governance systems in place where you have boards, etc., who go beyond just what the founder's belief is. So yes, it can happen. It just doesn't have to be matched to what he or she thinks about. So since I'm being sort of hounded, I'm going to close to say that in the last 2 days, we've talked about closing the gap on so many counts, closing the gap on culture, diversity, inclusion, and now purpose. But hey guys, we're not Gap, we're Nike, so we'll do it. So all the very best, and thank you so much. Thank you, Kass, that was wonderful.